Thank you, colleagues. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, dear friends, and all those colleagues who are joining us also online and watching, a very warm welcome and good morning. Thank you for joining us today at this important side event on the emergence of the 18th session of the United Nations General Assembly, dedicated to justice and accountability in Afghanistan. Your presence here is not only a gesture of solidarity, it is a firm commitment to stand with Afghan people at one of the most difficult moments in our nation's history. I extend my deep appreciation to our co-organizers, HRD Plus, and to the permanent missions of Albania, Australia, Canada, Chile, Greece, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands for your steadfast commitment to justice and accountability and for making this discussion possible. Excellencies, over the past 4 years, Afghanistan has been plunged into one of the darkest chapters of its modern history under the Taliban regime. The Afghan people today face multiple crises, foremost among them a human rights catastrophe. Women and girls, half of our society, have been deliberately erased from public life, denied the right to education, work, freedom of movement, and the ability to participate in their communities. They live under a system of gender apartheid and persecution that constitutes crime against humanity under international law. Importantly, all these grave violations are committed by the Taliban under the false guise of Sharia law, a distortion of religion used as a tool of repression. But the suffering extends beyond women and girls. Ethnic and religious minorities, human rights defenders, journalists, and former security personnel endure arbitrary detention, torture, enforced disappearances, and extrajudicial killings. With the dismantling of justice system, impunity reigns. Meanwhile, the Taliban's propagation of extremist ideologies through state-controlled institutions threaten not only Afghanistan's fragile social fabric, but also regional and global security. This crisis is compounded by one of the world's gravest humanitarian emergencies: natural disasters and forced return of refugees, and the sharp decline in humanitarian funding have left millions on the brink of survival. For women-hated households already stripped of rights of dignity, and devastation is absolute. Colleagues, against this grim reality, today's conversation is both timely and urgent. Our purpose is clear: to ensure that the voices of Afghan survivors and human rights defenders are not silenced, and that their demands for justice and accountability echo in this House of Nations. The issuance of the International Criminal Court arrest warrant for the Taliban's leader and the launch of initiative to hold the Taliban accountable under CEDAW are welcome and long overdue steps. They reflect the international community's growing recognition that crimes of this magnitude cannot be met with silence or impunity. We must therefore call for renewed support for robust monitoring and reporting mechanisms, including the UN Special Rapporteur and establishment of an independent international investigative mechanism. Survivor and victim-centered policies ensuring that Afghan voices, especially women and minorities and marginalized groups, remain at the center of decision-making. Stronger international unity to uphold accountability, protection, and the rejection of impunity. Excellencies, Afghanistan's tragedy is not only a national crisis. It is a test for the international system, a test for our shared principles, and of our collective resolve to act when fundamental rights are under assault. We cannot allow the Afghan people to be erased from our conscience, nor forgotten in our actions. This event brings together a distinguished panel of Afghan human rights defenders, women's rights activists, legal experts, member states representatives, and civil society leaders. I look forward to their insights and a frank, solution-focused dialogue that produce concrete recommendations. Together, let us turn Afghanistan pain into international action and Afghan resilience into a roadmap for justice. Thank you. I conclude my opening remarks, and now it's my honor to invite His Excellency Dr. Malik Setis, Chairperson of HRD Plus Steering Committee, to deliver his opening remarks. Please.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Fayed. On behalf of Human Rights Defenders Network, HRD Plus, I would like to thank you, all of you, for attending this very important event. I would like to join to thank the supportive state members of the United Nations, Albania, Australia, Canada, Chile, Greece, Luxembourg, and Netherlands. Thank you very much for your continuous support for human rights in Afghanistan. I would like to appreciate the role of Richard Bennett, who is actively providing realistic reports on the human rights situation in Afghanistan, especially a big thank from the human rights defenders family in Afghanistan to you, Richard. The human rights situation in Afghanistan is evident to everybody, so that's why we are from the civil society organizations asking continuously the international community to support us in establishing a functionable and dynamic monitoring mechanism for accountability in the human rights spheres in Afghanistan. But why we are asking this question, why we are continuously providing letters, statements, and advocating for this purpose? We have very important reasons for it. The first reason is that after the Taliban takeover, the civil society, human rights defenders, national human rights institution, and each of member of activist groups have fled Afghanistan. We do not have a monitoring system at the national level. That's a very important point that we have to remember that. The second point is, after the Taliban takeover, the international community also fled Afghanistan. We have only UNAMA and some UN agencies that providing some reports on the situation in Afghanistan and also deliver some humanitarian support. But Afghanistan remained alone. So we really need the international community to support us. The third, reason for asking such an important mechanism is the lack of complaint system at the national level in Afghanistan. According to the Taliban, even complaining against any violation of human rights, it's a big crime, especially for women in Afghanistan. So lack of complaining system at the national level and also at the international level. We have Richard, he does his best to provide the messages of violations in Afghanistan, but it's not enough. We need more support, we need more technical support for our civil society and human rights defenders. The fourth element, that the civil society, we are very poor in Afghanistan. The donor community has left the country, and no resources are allocated for the civil society and human rights defenders organizations inside the country. We are a human rights defenders network that established in Geneva as an exile network by support of OMCT, one of our partners, who is an organization against torture in Geneva. We are trying to communicate inside the country, but it is so complicated, it's very difficult. Our colleagues in Afghanistan do not have any resource to provide information, to make reports, to monitor the violations of human rights. So that's why we really need such a support. And finally, what is so important for us that the Taliban has a very dangerous concept against human rights. They are saying that human rights are domestic issues of Afghanistan. It's not international issue. So please do not interfere into our domestic situation. And they also prohibited to use human rights literature at the media and also at the society at all. So when the Taliban prohibited the literature of human rights, sometimes I'm just thinking about the situation in the world. When we are listening some hate speeches against human rights, against refugees' rights, against immigration rights at the General Assembly of the United Nations by some of the main leaders of the international community, then I think, what's happening in this world? From one hand, the Taliban prohibited the language and the literature of the human rights in our country. From the other hand, even the international community, some of the international community leaders provide such a statement against Muslims, immigrations, Muslims, fundamental human rights, to provide asylum seeking, to ask asylum seeking in Europe and the United States. So such a language also badly damages the human rights situation in my country, because the Taliban say, okay, human rights, it's a phenomena imposed by Western society in our country, while the Western society leaders are talking against human rights in such a important platforms. So please, in such a situation, we have a very paradoxical situation. So they are the main reasons that we would like to ask you to support us, to provide some mechanism that hold the Taliban accountable. I thank you very much for your time. And now I would like to ask our very supportive state member that we always had the privilege to get the support of Albania, to organize very good debates at the international level in support of our organization, Her Excellency Suela Janin, the ambassador and permanent representative of Albania in the United Nations.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, dear friends. It's a pleasure for me to be here today. In fact, dear Nasser, maybe we are not counting anymore how many events and debates we are organizing. But still, unfortunately, we are in a situation where Afghan women are suffering more. For 4 years now, when many of Afghan women came to Tirana and we offered shelter, hospitality for them, for their children, we've heard the terrible stories they shared with us, the difficulties, the risk to life, the risk to integrity, the risk to their dignity. And now still we are discussing the same issues. So when we ask ourselves, are we talking enough? I think that attention is there. Of course, we need more attention. But what we need more is action. And international community is failing in taking actions to safeguard Afghan women. So since the Taliban takeover in August 2021, Afghanistan has been plunged into one of the gravest humanitarian crises of our time. What we are witnesses is not only systemic exclusion, it is a deliberate erasure of half of a population for public life. The denial of education, employment, mobility, and participation amounts to gender apartheid and gender persecution, which may constitute crime against humanity under international law. Albania joins others in calling this violation by their true name, and we should not put ourselves in double standards or in double words. This is gender apartheid. The repression does not stop with women and girls. Religious and ethnic minorities, human rights defenders, journalists, and former officials continue to face arbitrary detention, torture, enforced disappearances, and executions. The dismantling of an independent justice system, the one that you mentioned, if there is breach of human rights, people need somewhere where to go and to fight for their rights. In Afghanistan, this does not exist. And it's a deliberate attention not to have justice system in place. But also another problem which is worrisome is the indoctrination of children in extremist institutions threatening Afghanistan's social fabric and regional stability. This is not just an Afghan tragedy. It is a test for the international community. Silence or inaction would remain and would mean complicity. That is why Albania strongly supports the continuation and strengthening of the mandate of the UN Special Rapporteur on situation of human rights in Afghanistan. We must make possible the implementation of survivor and victim-centered approaches, ensuring that Afghan women, girls, and marginalized groups are at the center of decision-making about their country's future. Furthermore, we see the establishment of an independent investigative mechanism to collect, preserve, and analyze evidence of international crimes as crucial to ensure accountability. Dear colleagues, accountability is not an abstract principle. It is the lifeline of justice. It is what tells victims that the world has not abandoned them, and it is what tells perpetrators that their crimes will not remain unpunished. The international community has a responsibility to protect those most at risk, to stand united against gender apartheid, and to ensure that Afghanistan does not become a black hole for human rights. Albania remains steadfast in this effort, working with partners to amplify Afghan voices and to build a strong coalition for protection and accountability. We will continue to advocate for concrete action, not only empty words. And I would like to conclude with a word to all Afghan women, those that are in the room, but also those that have not opportunity to follow us. Maybe you are erased from the eyes of the Taliban, but you are not forgotten, and you will be in our conscience and in our attention and in our actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency Ambassador Janina, for your very strong and steadfast remarks and continued support to the women of Afghanistan and to Afghan people, and particularly emphasizing on the accountability. And now it's a pleasure to invite Her Excellency Ambassador Agelia Balta, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Greece, to deliver her opening remarks. Excellency, please.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, it is an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today to pay tribute to the courageous Afghan women who strive to survive in darkness. I would like to thank the mission of Afghanistan for organizing this event. The mission of Greece is always at your side to shed light on the systematic and systemic violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms of Afghan women. I would also like to thank the co-sponsoring missions, but most importantly, the civil society participants who work tirelessly to awaken the international community. Without you, the women of Afghanistan would really have no choice and voice. And of course, a special thanks to our keynote speaker, the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Afghanistan. Greece strongly supports your mandate and urges the Taliban to facilitate your visit to the country. Dear colleagues, last Monday, we commemorated the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform Action. In a few weeks, we are celebrating the 25 years from the adoption of the emblematic Resolution 1325 establishing the WPS agenda. Yet, These milestones serve as a painful reminder of the dire situation faced by women and girls in Afghanistan. With more than 80 directives and decrees targeting the autonomy and everyday lives of women, the Taliban continue to engage in gender discrimination and gender-based violence, which may amount to gender persecution. With the law on propagation of virtue and prevention of vice, the Taliban are trying to erase women from public life. By restricting their freedom of movement, demanding that they may be accompanied by male family members and that they have their bodies and faces covered in public. Additionally, they have imposed measures to silence women, forbidding their voices from being heard in public spaces and stripping them of the right to freedom and expression. At the same time, the Taliban's decision to suspend women's and girls' access to education in private and public medical institutions in December 2024, combined with their previous decision to ban women from working for the United Nations and non-governmental organizations in Afghanistan, has had severe repercussions for the delivery of health care and humanitarian assistance to women and girls. The catastrophic results of this decision were manifest during the recent earthquake that struck Afghanistan, when male rescuers and doctors were not allowed to touch women's bodies, leaving many injured women without medical care and leading to deaths that could have been avoided. Greece condemns in the strongest possible terms these egregious practices and urges the Taliban to put an end to them and abide by Afghanistan's international obligations and commitments. In particular, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. We also welcome all steps towards accountability. In addition, we cannot ignore the human rights violations against ethnic and minority groups, as well as the reprisals against civil society representatives and human rights defenders who dare to expose the oppression of the de facto authorities. We also deplore the restrictions against journalists who pose a serious threat to the freedom of the media. Dear colleagues, Greece believes in the stability, prosperity, and sustainable peace in Afghanistan and reiterates its solidarity with the Afghan people. We support the continuation of principled engagement with the Taliban with clear timelines and benchmarks, and we call for the inclusive participation of women and all segments of Afghan society in the Doha process. We reiterate that the respect of human rights and women's rights, the establishment of an inclusive government with the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women, and the adherence of Afghanistan to its international obligations and prerequisites for the normalization of the country's relations with the international community. And one last message to the Afghan women and girls. It's a commitment. We will never forget you, and we will continue to fight for your freedom and the right to live in dignity. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Mbalta, for very strong message and also for highlighting the importance of principled and engagement and the importance of accountability. We are truly grateful to you and to your team, and particularly as a member of Security Council. It's very important. Thank you. And now it's my honor to invite His Excellency Ambassador, Deputy Ambassador of Luxembourg, Ms. Anne Dostrit. Please. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador. Dear colleagues, Luxembourg is honored to co-sponsor this side event, which is an initiative that is very much driven by civil society and which allows us to hear from grassroots panelists on how the cycles of violence and impunity continue to dominate women and girls' lives in Afghanistan. Since the Taliban's takeover of the country in 2021, life for women and girls, but also for LGBTIQ+ people and other marginalized groups, has changed radically. Their rights and freedoms are continuously being violated, and the space in which they are allowed to exist becomes smaller by the minute. The repercussion of this systemic gender persecution will have an impact on the country for generations to come, and as you said, on the whole world also, because we cannot accept violations anywhere. And as women and girls have no longer access to education, to the labor market, and to many other essential services. Over the past couple of years, Luxembourg has continuously supported the plea of Afghan women and girls, and we have worked together with many of the civil society representatives in the room, and we really want to work more to create awareness around what is happening on the ground and to exchange on ways to support the remaining grassroots movements in the countries. But words are not enough, and we need to ensure that those responsible for the many human rights violations are held accountable. Impunity is never an option. Allow me to be clear once again. We condemn the widespread violations of human rights, and in particular the systemic persecution of Afghan women and girls, which is prosecuted as a crime against humanity under the Rome Statute and amounts to gender-based apartheid. Luxembourg has reaffirmed its support for the international criminal justice system by joining 5 other states in referring the situation in Afghanistan to the ICC in 2024. In July this year, the ICC Pre-Trial Chamber 2 issued warrants of arrest for the Supreme Leader of the Taliban and its Chief Justice of the Taliban, considering that the Taliban, in their governmental policy, have specifically targeted girls and women by reason of their gender, depriving them of fundamental rights and freedoms which constitute crimes against humanity. In Geneva, we have also been supportive of the efforts to create an independent investigative mechanism to collect evidence on the most serious violations of international law. This evidence will be crucial to ensure accountability of those responsible, facilitate and expedite fair and independent criminal proceedings, and ensure that victims are not forgotten. I think in everything we do, the victims need to be in the center. To conclude, allow me also to thank Special Rapporteur Bennett, with whom we work closely both here in Geneva, for his efforts and his reporting, which is vital. I really look forward to hearing from the panel and would like to thank in advance all civil society representatives for their remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Dostred, and particularly for highlighting your support from the civil society and Afghan women and girls, and also the international justice system. And the initiative of ICC is really important, and highlighting that impunity is not acceptable. Thank you. It's now my honor to invite Ambassador Beth Delaney, Deputy Permanent Representative of Australia, to make her opening remarks. Ambassador, floor is yours.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for hosting today's event. Of course, we are also honoured to be a co-sponsor. Women and girls' human rights in Afghanistan, as in every country, are a global imperative to protect. We know, as we've heard from my distinguished ambassadors already, in Afghanistan, the Taliban has demonstrated contempt for the human rights and fundamental freedoms of women and girls through a campaign of sustained and systemic oppression that seeks to silence and erase women from public life. Australia remains gravely concerned by the worsening situation in Afghanistan. Our thoughts are with Afghans around the world, and we continue to support and advocate for the Afghan people. As Australia's Foreign Minister said during the open debate last year, the Taliban have erased women from Afghanistan's self-portrait, effectively imprisoning half the society's population, immediately halves their country's potential. And we need to fix it. This is why 1 year ago, Australia, together with Canada, Germany and the Netherlands, commenced action to hold Afghanistan to account for its violations of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women under the Taliban. In commencing action under CEDAW, we united with states from all regions of the world on the importance of strong international action to respond to the gross and systemic human rights violations and abuses in Afghanistan. 1 year on, we continue to pursue negotiations as provided for under CEDAW and condemn the Taliban's ongoing efforts to silence Afghan women and girls and deny their human rights. Australia is committed to working together to ensure that Afghanistan adheres to its international human rights obligations, to respect, protect, and promote the human rights of women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, and we are truly grateful for the initiative of Australia, Netherlands, Germany, and Canada for to hold Taliban's accountable under the CEDAW, and also all those other member states who joined this initiative. Thank you. And now, with that, it's my honor to invite Ambassador Katja Leijser, Ambassador of Netherlands, to take the floor and deliver your opening remarks, please.
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying that the Netherlands remains deeply committed to the rights of women and girls in Afghanistan. We offer financial support to human rights initiatives in Afghanistan like we have done in the past, and with a specific focus on the rights of women and girls. For example, we have an ongoing project that focuses on supporting female journalists. Also, our humanitarian partner organizations are active in Afghanistan, and they focus on the most vulnerable people in need of assistance, including women and girls. As was already mentioned by my colleague from Australia, there is ample and convincing evidence that Afghanistan is responsible for gross and systematic violations of human rights of Afghan women and girls, which is why, together with Germany, Canada, and Australia, we took the necessary step of holding Afghanistan responsible for violations of the CEDAW. This will be a lengthy process, but it's an essential and concrete step to show Afghan women and girls that they are not forgotten and that such violations are not left without consequence. We believe it's essential that women have a seat at the table in all accountability, justice, and peace processes. That's why, with the CEDAW initiative, and together with our partners, we have organized consultations with Afghan civil society to ensure inclusive and victim-centered justice, to ultimately address as many of the needs of Afghan women and girls as possible. This engagement will continue throughout the process of this initiative and beyond. And I'm glad to see such a diverse group of individuals here, from Afghan human rights defenders, women rights activists, and others, having this essential discussion on justice and accountability. That having been said, we remain deeply concerned about the persistent lack of accountability for human rights violations in Afghanistan. We, as the international community, must remain united in ensuring accountability and close this so-called accountability gap. The Netherlands, therefore, with its EU partners, will actively participate during the upcoming Human Rights Council to discuss further accountability efforts, including the establishment of a robust international accountability mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for highlighting the accountability, your support for the accountability mechanism, robust accountability mechanism in human rights, and that's something that we are all, an Afghan woman and human rights defenders, are asking. We appreciate you for highlighting that. And now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Chile, and one of the co-sponsors of this event. Excellency, please, the floor is yours.
Chile is happy to co-sponsor this event, and we would like to thank the organizer for this event. And for Chile, the plight of people, Afghan people, especially women and girls, has never been distant. We know from our own story during the 70s, the scare left by systematic human rights violations. And we also know how vital international solidarity was for Chile to recover the democracy. This is why we never forget the duty to raise our voice when rights are trampled elsewhere. As my president reminded us in his address to the General Assembly, what happened in places like Gaza, Ukraine, and also in Afghanistan is not far away from Chile. A violation of human rights is in one country weaken the protection of rights everywhere because we are part of a single human family. And as you mentioned, Chargé d'Affaires, it also affects the global security. Chile, therefore, stands in full support to efforts to document and denounce the crimes committed under the Taliban rule. Gender persecution, persecution of minorities, torture, and enforced disappearance. We believe in universal human rights, and we believe in accountability. Impunity cannot be last word. As you know, last November, Chile, together with Costa Rica, Spain, France, Luxembourg, and Mexico, referred the situation of Afghanistan to the International Crime Court. We did it in light of the worsening condition and the gravity of the violations suffered by women and girls, and with the conviction that these crimes must be investigated and prosecuted. This step reflects a shared commitment to accountability and to protection of women's rights. This situation also highlights the urgency of advancing a future convention on crimes against humanity. Such an instrument would close existing gaps in international law and strengthen global capacity to prevent atrocities and hold perpetrators accountable, ensuring that grave violations like those committed against Afghan women and girls are met with consistent and determined international response. Finally, let me stress that Chile's participation in this dialogue is not symbolic. It is deeply connected to our daily work in the Third Committee, where we address situations of torture and persecution of LGBTI persons and the denial of fundamental freedom. This side event strengthens that agenda. We will continue to act consistently, co-sponsored initiatives, supporting the mandate of the UN Special Rapporteur, calling for independent investigative mechanisms, and giving space to Afghan voices in the multilateral forum. For us, the message is clear. We must never tire of speaking out, never grow indifferent, and never accept silence. Justice for Afghanistan is a responsibility for all humanity. I thank you.
Thank you very much. We are truly grateful to Chile's continued support as a member who has always highlighted and supported the principles of human rights and accountability, the UN, and not only this, but always since the collapse of Afghanistan, Chile has been very active and supportive. We are so much grateful. Thank you so much for your strong statement. With that, we came to the conclusion of the first part of our session, the opening session, and now we go to the next part, which is a very important part. That's the keynote speaker or keynote address from a very well-known, respectable, and a very strong and advocate of human rights. That he doesn't need introduction, Mr. Richard Bennett, to whom, as Dr. Setez highlighted, all Afghans, particularly women and girls and Afghan citizens, are so much grateful for his work. Mr. Richard Bennett, Special UN Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Afghanistan, please take the floor and deliver your remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Faik. I'm really honored to be part of this event and to deliver some remarks. Excellencies and colleagues, I also thank the organizers and the very impressive array of co-sponsors for this event. After decades of impunity, justice and accountability in Afghanistan are critical for the country's future if the cycles of violence and repression are to be disrupted. As we're all aware, the human rights situation in Afghanistan has deteriorated dramatically since the Taliban retook control 4 years ago, and nowhere can this be seen more clearly than in the situation of women and girls. Since seizing power, the Taliban has issued and enforced a litany of decrees, edicts, and instructions which deprive women and girls of their most basic and fundamental rights, including their rights to freedom of movement, education, work, healthcare, expression, and access to justice. These violations are so severe, I and others, including the prosecutor of the ICC, have concluded they amount to crimes against humanity, in particular persecution on the grounds of gender. They are also well characterized as gender apartheid. While women and girls bear the brunt of the Taliban's oppression, no one is spared. Men, boys, LGBTQ people, marginalized ethnic and religious communities, journalists, human rights defenders, foreign government officials, and members of security forces. Indeed, any Afghan who dissents from the Taliban's extremist ideology all face a deeply repressive regime that dictates almost every aspect of life and uses fear and violence, or the threat of it, to enforce its thirst for power under the guise of religion. The situation is compounded by those who face layered discrimination and exclusion as a result of intersecting identities, especially women and girls from minority and marginalized communities, as well as LGBTQ Afghans. Because the Taliban exercises tight control over the territory and generally refuses to compromise, some in the international community may think that Afghanistan is a lost cause, at least for the time being, and that the most that can be expected is to mitigate their worst excesses and hopefully find some entry points for moderation. However, Excellencies, Afghanistan is not a lost cause. It's a test of whether the world will stand firm against gender persecution, a test of whether human rights principles apply universally or only when politically convenient, a test of whether we hear the voices of Afghans, especially women, who continue to valiantly resist despite extraordinary risks, and a test of whether we are prepared to challenge the impunity that has perpetuated violence for decades in Afghanistan. Now is not the time for normalization, and instead, I'm consistently calling for an all-tools approach, which comprises a range of interventions which maximize the potential for the emergence of a more stable and inclusive Afghanistan. Accountability and justice are central to this. It's crucial to send a strong message to the de facto authorities that there will be consequences for their actions. This can be achieved by utilizing and strengthening existing accountability mechanisms and working to create new ones. And I welcome that beyond words, in the past year, there has been indeed some action. For example, I welcome the announcement of the International Criminal Court which is seeking arrest warrants for senior Taliban leaders as an important step. Holding individuals criminally accountable for their acts towards the people of Afghanistan is essential. I also welcome the accountability initiative by a group of states, mentioned here several times today, some of whom to hold Afghanistan as a state accountable for violations of the CEDAW Convention, an initiative that may reach the International Court of Justice. It's essential that Afghans, in particular Afghan women, girls, and members of minority and marginalized communities, are actively and meaningfully included throughout that process. And I encourage those present in this room to use your positions and platforms to advocate for this inclusion. Codifying the crime of gender apartheid would also potentially create new avenues for accountability. As many of you will know, since the late 1990s, Afghan women and some men have stated that this term best describes their lived reality under Taliban rule. The General Assembly's Third Committee has made encouraging progress towards a Crimes Against Humanity treaty. I urge states, including those in the room today, to support this process. Finally, what I'm hoping will soon be a new and important development is an independent investigative mechanism. The draft resolution on Afghanistan, which was tabled in the Human Rights Council just last week, and which I hope will be adopted next week, would establish such a mechanism. It would be complementary to existing mechanisms and have a comprehensive mandate to investigate past and ongoing violations, collect and preserve evidence, and prepare case files to support future prosecutions and other forms of accountability. It would work side by side, both with my mandate, the International Criminal Court, and any further accountability efforts, such as cases brought under universal jurisdiction. I encourage national prosecution units in different jurisdictions to open gender-competent investigations into crimes committed by members of all parties throughout the long conflict and since the Taliban regained power. It's also important to stress that for the people of Afghanistan, especially women and girls, accountability often extends beyond legal measures and includes the restoration of rights, access to essential services, and the creation of conditions in which women, girls, and indeed all Afghans can live with dignity. And that's why I'm calling for an all-tools approach, of which accountability and justice is at the core, but which also includes increased and sustained political support, including for an inclusive national political dialogue, which reflects the views and participation of all Afghans, as recommended by the independent assessment provided to the Security Council at the end of 2023. As part of this, I want to stress the importance of centering women's voices, rights, and agency in all decision-making, political and accountability processes, with effective action to ensure their full, safe, equal, and meaningful participation. The role of Afghan and women-led civil society, both in country and in exile, is crucial, and their future depends on financial assistance, especially for those providing legal support and advice, offering protection and safe houses, as well as those providing education and economic empowerment opportunities for women and girls. Furthermore, humanitarian support for Afghans inside the country and for refugees remains essential. This includes providing protection and support for Afghan refugees, including by supporting countries that are hosting refugees in the region, offering resettlement opportunities, humanitarian visas, educational scholarships, and family reunification. Afghanistan is not a safe country, and I am very concerned about states deporting or forcefully returning Afghans, potentially in violation of the principle of non-refoulement. I call on all states, those neighboring Afghanistan and those farther afield, to halt mass returns and deportations. Finally, I want to stress the critical importance of maintaining a principled approach to the crisis in Afghanistan, one that is rooted in human rights and prioritizes dignity, equality, and non-discrimination. There must be no normalization, including via official recognition or by establishing commercial, military, or strategic engagement with the Taliban, unless and until there are demonstrated improvements in human rights, in particular for women and girls. Any normalization of engagement without such improvements would not only be vastly premature, it would take us further away from our ultimate aim, a stable, inclusive, and rights-respecting Afghanistan. I look forward to the next and most important part of this event, listening to the panel of Afghan experts. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard, for very eloquent, very clear messages, and also for elaborating the dire situation in Afghanistan and for specific demands, and particularly the parts that you mentioned about maintaining a principled approach when engagement with the Taliban until there is no improvements on the human rights and the situation of women and girls. So I would like to thank you for that. And now we will go for the very important and next part of our session, which is the panel discussion with distinguished panelists. And we are very honored to have a very wonderful moderator, Dr. Sarah Taylor. She will be moderating our panel. And Dr. Sarah Taylor has worked on women, peace, and security agenda for over 20 years, including in academia, civil society, and the UN. And she has worked on in different countries, including Afghanistan, Ukraine, Myanmar, Central African. And she has previously worked in International Peace Institute, Inclusive Peace, and Human Rights Watch, and NGO working groups on women, peace, and security. So I hand over the floor to our distinguished moderator, Dr. Taylor, and she will take it from there, please.
Thank you so much. I am deeply honored to be here amongst all of you, and really grateful that I get to moderate this discussion of astounding Afghan experts. I want to thank all of the ambassadors and other distinguished guests, including Special Rapporteur, for your important insights on this topic. As discussed, this must be part of an effort to make sure that Afghanistan and support for human rights in Afghanistan remains at the center of our work and not overtaken by the other many crises that are enveloping the world at this moment. As has been referenced as just one example, the vast gulf could not seem to be wider between the lived reality of Afghan women and girls and the principles embodied in the Charter, Beijing Platform for Action, and the upcoming Resolution 1325 25th anniversary. So it's our job to make sure that we are not only reflecting that reality, but also, as many of you have already illustrated, taking action to improve the status of women and girls in this country. To discuss these ways forward, I'm absolutely delighted to moderate a discussion amongst our panelists today. Mariam Faik Gadiwal, a women's rights activist and advocate. Fatima Ahmadi, a human rights researcher and defender. Atal Ahmadzai, environmental expert and political ecologist who will be joining us online. Joyce Bukaru, the Amnesty International rep to the UN here in New York. Negina Yari, Executive Director at the Window for Hope. We also have a statement from a woman human rights defender inside Afghanistan. So, without further ado, we will start off with a first round of reflections from our panelists. After that, on their areas of expertise. After that initial round, we'll have a lightning round or a quick round where we will ask them to provide recommendations for us on the way forward. So that we really are looking at action in this session. So I will start with Mariam. Mariam, I'm going to ask you to give your reflections on the current status of the current state of situation in Afghanistan, including the recent bans by the Taliban. The floor is yours.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, I stand before you today not only with a heavy responsibility, but with the unshakable determination of an Afghan woman who refuses to let silence define her people. I thank you for the opportunity to address this assembly at a time when Afghanistan faces compound crisis of repression and disaster. My remarks today highlight three interconnected realities: the Taliban ongoing edicts against women, the disproportionate gender impact of recent earthquake in eastern provinces, and the urgent need for international accountability mechanism. Repression has become the law of the land. Since August 2021, the Taliban have issued more than 70 edicts designed to erase women and girls from public life. Among the most devastating is the ban on secondary and higher education for girls and women in Afghanistan. Today, 2.2 million Afghan girls remain barred from school beyond the primary level. In just 1 year, 400,000 more girls were pushed out of classrooms. These are not isolated measures. They are form of system of forced exclusion and subjugation, formally recognized in international law as a crime against humanity, and as the UN Special Rapporteur has rightly called it, it is gender apartheid. By denying an Afghan girl the right to education, the Taliban are not only closing classroom doors, but extinguishing every pathway for women participating in society, whether in politics, civil life, or the professions essential for a nation's future. Repression magnified by disaster. The 6.3 magnitude earthquake of Afghanistan 2025 in August in eastern Afghanistan added new layer of suffering. In Kunar and Nangarhar, over 2,200 people died. More than 3,600 were injured, and at least 500,000 were affected. Among them were 263,000 children. More than 6,700 homes were destroyed, alongside over 20 health facilities. Women and girls have profoundly affected. 52% of fatality and 54% of injury were women. More than 11,600 pregnant women are among those impacted. Yet in Kunar province, only 10% of health workers are women, mostly nurses and midwives, while female doctors are extremely scarce. Restriction and requirement for any woman to have a male guardian to travel further prevent women from reaching life-saving care. At the same time, women survivors face heightened risk of gender-based violence, child marriage, and trafficking due to displacement, overcrowded shelters, and the loss of livelihoods. The facts remain as disaster in Afghanistan do not strike in isolation. They unfold against a backdrop of systemic repression magnifying gender vulnerabilities. Accountability cannot wait. In light of these realities, we join Afghan civil society in calling for an independent international accountability mechanism for Afghanistan. This is not an abstract idea, but rather it is a necessary tool to confront entrenched impunity, to document crimes, and to pave the way for justice. I have my 3 guidelines, but I would finish it with the last one. Excellencies, the Taliban decrees are erasing women from public life. Natural disasters such as the earthquake in Kunar and Nangarhar deepen their vulnerabilities. Without accountability, this cycle of repression, neglect, and impunity will only continue. We urge member states, UN bodies gather here to act decisively to ensure that Afghan women, men, and children are not left without justice, without dignity, and without hope. At last, the urgency of this situation can be understood through the example of ozone layer. When that protective shield was depleted, the damage has already occurred. and ultraviolet rays began to penetrate, endangering all of the humanity. In the same way, the Taliban deprivation of education for Afghan girls over the past 4 years has already inflicted irreversible harm on an entire generation of a nation. And just as ozone depletion could not be continued over one region, the consequence of denying education will not remain confined to Afghanistan. They will radiate outward, weaken stability, fueling extremism, and ultimately threatening global peace and security. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Miriam. I will now turn to our video from a woman human rights defender from inside Afghanistan for reflections on, I believe, on the health system.
Since the Taliban took power, life for women and girls became a daily struggle. Going to a doctor is no longer available, but it's impossible. More than 60% women cannot visit a doctor without a male relatives. Over 60% of a clinic and hospital does not have a female doctor or nurses. So many women are refused treatment. And 1 in 3 women give birth without any trained medical help, which put their lives and their baby lives in danger. These numbers are not just a statistic, they are real people. Just yesterday in my district, Shognon, a mother dies in childbirth because no female doctor was available. In my neighborhood, there was a girl, 23 years old. She dies from the simple infection because she cannot reach a clinic. A student with a dream of becoming a doctor is forced to leave the university due to ban on education. It's human rights crisis. It's a part of system designed to remove women from public life to silently kill us. We ask you to hold de facto accountable, treating the denial of health and education as crimes against humanity. Give direct support to healthcare services with women centers that reach women and girls, and support women lead group working on the ground. Afghan women are not just asking for sympathy. We are asking for justice and simple right to see a doctor, to give safely birth, to study, to work, and to live with dignity. Choose justice, not just a word.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Yes, I think we will all join in sending our thanks to this woman human rights defender, and to reflect on the points that both she and Miriam have made about the very real and very concrete ways in which these devastating bans have impacted the daily lives of women, and that's just the healthcare sector. We'll now turn to Fatima, who will be providing us with some insights on the importance of the ICJ and the action there, and the call for action, particularly for child rights. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Afghanistan Mission, HRD Plus, RWI, and Special Rapporteur, and all of the states for bringing the session together. It's not easy to talk about Afghanistan women's and girls' situation. As you heard from our colleague in Afghanistan and also Mayam John, it's very frustrating to come here asking this body, the UN and its member states, for solidarity and action. While we are sitting here, millions of girls in Afghanistan have lost 4 years of education. The world has failed to act, and girls' futures are slipping away. Women's and girls' voices must be heard in this building of nations. If they're not heard here, then the Taliban have not only succeeded in deliberately silencing and erasing us from every sphere of society, but also from your memory. Yet over these past days of world leaders' speeches, this tragedy has been barely mentioned. I thank actually Ireland and Ukraine for raising the darkness of human rights in Afghanistan. But their voices should not be standalone. Since August 2021, the Taliban have issued more than 130 decrees, actually, against women, specifically designed for erasing women's rights from Afghanistan, and it documented by Femina. Afghanistan is the only country on earth that girls are banned from secondary higher education, women are barred from work, and families are struggling with the consequences. The results are devastating. Children are forced into hazardous labor, girls pushed into early and child marriages, and entire generations are robbed of hopes. Rawadari and Afghan human rights organizations verified several cases of underage forced marriages of young girls being married to older men in exchange of money, men like 50 years old, and cases that girls age 15 and 14 married to men older age, and receive other reports that forced marriages of girls to the Taliban members and authorities, and they're going with impunity of their child rights violations. Education itself has been weaponized. Instead of schools for modern education, the Taliban are building madrasas to indoctrinate children to extremism. In April 2022, the Taliban's Minister of Education announced plans to establish 10 new madrasas in every district of the country. This is not about teaching faith. This is about fast-tracking of generation into dogmatism and fanaticism. For my study, I listened directly to those living this reality. A widow once employed. Now she cannot leave her home without a male escort. A 12-year-old daughter that should be in a school and instead working in a factory to feed her family. A boy in Kabul spends 10 hours a day bringing loads to the market because the Taliban decrees have plunged his family into poverty. These are the reality of women and girls and boys in Afghanistan. And over the past 4 years, under the Taliban rule, these realities have been ignored. The impact goes beyond lost opportunities. Children are exposed to exploitations, physical danger, psychological trauma. And Afghanistan women live under what only can describe as gender apartheid. And Special Rapporteur mentioned the history. The first time of the Taliban, Afghan women mentioned this is a gender apartheid. This is not a new term. This is a situation every time in Afghanistan, women and girls experiencing under the Taliban. They are denied healthcare, education, employment, and freedom of movement. Minorities face discrimination and persecution, and some forced into religious conversions. They are the very fabric of society that was rooted in Afghan culture and values now is being destroyed. The Taliban is not our culture. It's not our religion. And yet, despite suffocating repression, Afghan women and girls and young generation continue practicing what we call everyday resistance. They hold underground schools, secret groups to study, engaging in a quiet act of defiance. Those forced in exile, banging on your doors, demanding accountability. They remind us, remind you, the erosion is not as the silence. And excellencies and guests, Afghanistan is not just a humanitarian crisis, as all of us, we know what is happening. It's the crisis of conscience and accountability. For how long we should be silent about this Taliban, erasing us from the society and erasing us from accessing the very, very basic human rights. Those forced in exile just asking you for accountability, nothing more. And the Taliban are committing systematic gender persecution. It's a crime against humanity. It's the highest crime, one of the highest crimes. Women are denied the breath of freedom outside of their home. Children are denied their basic rights. the world is silencing and normalizing actually this brutality. The ones who unleash the brutalities and violations should not be rewarded with consulate in Germany, in other places. And Afghans should not be sent back to Afghanistan. It's not normal. That life is not normal. We lived with dignity in the past. And I thank everyone here, and I keep my recommendation for later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatima, for drawing the lines between what can feel like abstract notions of the right to dignity, the importance of hope, and what stripping Afghans of dignity and hope looks like in daily lived reality. And thank you for your call for accountability. We're going to switch it up a little bit because we have a slight change to our speakers. I do have the honor of inviting Ambassador Ray from Canada to provide some remarks at this particular moment in our program because he has managed to come here and be with us for a short period of time, but of course, UNGA makes demands on times. So Ambassador Ray, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your inviting me to this event, and we're very, very happy to be co-sponsoring it. I'm at the same time sorry that, as Sarah said, it's UNGA is like a train station. You come and you go, and the schedule is relentless, and the trains don't wait for you. So I have to be rude and intervene in the middle of a conversation that I think is a very important one. I just want to say a few words about, pay tribute to a few people in the room who've worked incredibly hard. I can say to all of you that your chargé, Nasir, has done an extraordinary job in the face of really challenging circumstances since the events of August 2021. And he's helped to bring us all together in focusing our attention over and over and over again. I chair the group that's known as the Group of Friends of Afghanistan, and I've held that job since August of 2020. I will be handing it over when I leave in November, after my 5 years are up, but I really have appreciated the opportunity to do this. I can also assure you that there is, thanks to the efforts of former Prime Minister Trudeau, to make a point of making sure that we were accessible to Afghan women and men and children who wanted to come to Canada. That we have a community of over 60,000 people now, and a great many of them resident in what has been and will be again my home community of Toronto. So I will be working with that community to continue to engage on the issues that we need to continue to work on together. I also want to thank Richard Bennett, who's been a constant source of information and counsel and encouragement to me personally, but also to the members of the ad hoc group that has been meeting regularly and is engaging on these critically important questions. And finally, I want to pay particular tribute to the women who are here and the women who have been active in really reminding us and compelling us to do more. And I think this is one of the things that I draw from every conversation is no matter what we have been able to do, it's not a matter of sort of taking credit and then sitting on our hands and saying, we've done this, thank you very much. And, not at all. The battle, as everyone has made it very, very clear, the battle continues in a very intense way. And in paying tribute to the women who are here, I also want to pay tribute to the women who are in Afghanistan and who are there. And it's very important for us to remember that for all those who have come out and added their voices and been able to get attention from the media and been able to come to meetings at the UN, engage with us here. It's very, very, very important for us to remember that there are millions of women in Afghanistan who are continuing their vigil and their fight and who have not given up and are not stopping and are still extremely active and engaged in every way. There is this constant tension about how to engage in the struggle when from the outside. It's a struggle that affects everyone here as we reflect on what we can do and how can we be effective. And the same struggle applies to governments. And in the group of governments that have been active on Afghan issues for many years, there are those who continue to engage directly and who travel directly and who go to Afghanistan and are there and are meeting with whatever officials will meet and who are continuing to engage in that way. Canada has taken the position that we will not be sending official representatives to Afghanistan under the current regime. But we will continue to support in a humanitarian way, the efforts that we need to be able to respond to. And we have our ambassador in Doha, whose responsibility for talking to representatives who were there. I think it's, and at the same time, we know that there are other states that are engaging in other ways. As chair of the task force of the group, the ad hoc group, we live this tension every meeting. Some people say we should be doing more. Other people say we should be doing it differently. And we're all struggling to do something that we think will be in any way effective in helping to change the way the regime operates and change the way it treats women. We've also been partnering with Australia, with Germany, and with the Netherlands to hold Afghanistan accountable under the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, better known as CEDAW. And in the Doha process, which we still participate in, we believe very strongly that the presence of women in Doha on the delegations meeting with representatives of the regime is exceptionally important. And we do not believe that human rights should in any way, shape, or form be excluded from the agenda. We don't believe that at all. I think it's important for us to really continue to assess the details of what is happening, as painful as that is. And any process that can be undertaken, any research that can be undertaken, any work that can be undertaken that's factually based, it's looking at what's actually happening, what are the conditions on the ground, how has it happened, is, I think, is critically important. I continue to believe that the use of the term apartheid in describing the condition of Afghan women is actually helpful. I also have to tell you that the lawyers in my government would say, no. I just say, well, I'm only here for a couple more months, so I'm going to just say exactly what I think. And I'll tell you why it's helpful. It's helpful because it's a very harsh term. It's a harsh term that is intended to describe a harsh situation. There's no other term that adequately, at the moment, in our common sort of legal and other parlance, actually reflects the fact that women are being held apart, are being kept separate. And they are separate but not equal. When schools were segregated in the United States, the legal argument was made, yes, the schools are separate, black people are educated separately from white people, but those schools are just as good. And when Thurgood Marshall, who was the lawyer for the NWCP, went in front of the Supreme Court of the United States in 1954, the reason he won the argument is because he said, no, look at the facts. Look at the levels of education that are being provided. Look at the amount of money that's being spent per student. Look at the number of students that are able to graduate. Look how this works in practice. In practice, it is separate and unequal. And that's what forced the hand of the Supreme Court to say, well, that's true, and so we have to integrate. As we all know, the apartheid regime in South Africa collapsed in a sense, under not only the weight of international boycotts, but it collapsed under the weight of its own contradictory ambitions. It wanted to be economically successful, and at the same time, it insisted on keeping people separate at every moment of contact. And as time went on, the system could not operate. It could not function. I don't believe that an apartheid system can operate in Afghanistan successfully. I don't believe you can have a productive economy. I don't believe you can have an effective society, being one in which women are so systematically deprived of education and systematically deprived of opportunities to work and to engage in society. So this is not a private religious matter. There's no other Muslim state that takes the view that this is a necessary interpretation of Islam. This is just patriarchy and misogyny dressed up as an ideology that claims to be religious. It's a fake. And so it's just a tool of oppression, of men using women as tools, men using women as objects, men using women for their own gratification. It isn't even close to meeting the test of what it means to treat people with dignity. So it's a huge battle. And the comments that have been made, Miriam, I heard your comments as I was coming in, I couldn't agree more. The notion somehow that we can keep this sealed within Afghanistan, and that the ideas that are being perpetrated in Afghanistan will just stay there and won't travel anywhere else, is quite false. We see the spread of misogyny and patriarchy in the world. We see how its reality in Afghanistan emboldens the people who do not believe women are equal, who do not believe women should have access to education, who do not believe women have a role in life more than just procreation. You can see it everywhere. And at the core of it is a country that believes you can run an entire society on the basis of separation, what we call apartheid. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that it's possible for us to pretend that somehow that it can be contained in one country. It clearly can't. And so I think this is a very, very important global issue. It's not a minor problem facing a country that's poor. It's not just an act of oppression that is an anomaly in the rest of the world. It's the core of a cancer that can spread, and it's up to us to stop the cancer at its core. And we have to stop what's happening in Afghanistan. And so we have to use a variety of means and methods to do this. But I think one of the ways that we can do it most effectively is not being afraid to call it for what it is and how it does create such great harm. So I've been told that my time is up, so that's good. Over time limit. I know, that's why my government's calling me back. I'm over my time limit. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
There we go. Ambassador, thank you. Thank you for taking the time and for using your status as a returning ambassador to call it what it is, indeed. I recognize that we are running a little bit short on time. I'm now going to turn to our colleague online, Atal Amatzai, who will be discussing some aspects of environmental justice in Afghanistan. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Do you hear me? Hello? Do you hear me? Do you have my sound?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so distinguished representative of member states, dear participants and guests. Afghanistan under the Taliban is facing a dual crisis. The political oppression orchestrated by the regime has not only deprived Afghans of their fundamental human rights and freedom, but it has also exacerbated the impacts of the ongoing ecological crisis in the country. The nexus between political oppression and ecological crisis in the country is starkly evident, and it warrants immediate attention. As the global discourse on climate change transforms towards grassroots climate adaptation efforts and intervention, the significance of political and civil rights, such as access to information, education, and political participation becomes increasingly critical and consequential. With the Taliban's infringement on individual freedoms, millions of Afghans face heightened climate vulnerabilities and reduced adaptive capabilities. The regime's oppressive social policies systematically exacerbate the impacts of climate shocks, leading to increased mortality, morbidity, loss of livelihood in livestock, and the degradation of cultural identity in social capital. Understanding the unique dynamic of this nexus between rights and climate impacts in Afghanistan is crucial, given the country's extreme vulnerability to acute and chronic climate shocks. Science or scientific studies identifies Afghanistan as one of the most susceptible nations to climate shocks, including floods, drought, and rising temperatures. Furthermore, the combination of the country's geological and ecological conditions, along with a lack of functional, institutional, and physical infrastructure for climate resilience, results in a diminished climate adaptive capabilities of the Afghan population. Science also indicates that in upcoming years, exacerbating climate events will become commonplace in Afghanistan. Paradoxically to these realities, as the environmental challenges mount, the Taliban's outright assault on human capabilities and development spirals into a vicious cycle of political and ecological crisis. Moreover, it is vital to recognize that while all Afghans are tussling with the intensifying impacts of climate shocks, particular social groups, especially Afghan women and children, bear the brunt of these crises due to their existing vulnerabilities. News reports indicate that recent climate events has disproportionately affected women and children. This alarming trend not only highlights the structural factors hindering the adaptive capabilities of the marginalized social groups, including women and children, but also demonstrate how the regime's war on women and their rights further exacerbate their suffering. Such a situation represents a profound injustice towards Afghan women, girls, and children. We also need to realize that Afghanistan and Afghan women in particular bear no responsibility for the prevailing anthropogenic climate change. Nonetheless, they are compelled to endure unprecedented toll due to oppressive and draconian social policies enforced by the regime, policies that directly undermine human agency. Moreover, the lack of attention from the international community regarding the climate-related struggle faced by Afghan women and children indicates that it implicates the communities in climate injustice suffered by Afghanistan, its vulnerable population. It is deeply unjust that their struggle remain largely overlooked in the current international discourse about an engagement with the regime in Kabul. This leads us to an essential point. And the point is that climate adaptation must be prioritized in both global and regional initiatives concerning Afghanistan in engagement with the current regime in Kabul. For too long, since the return of Taliban to power, the nexus of political and ecological crises has been overshadowed by a narrow focus on political issues. During this time, while the Taliban has utilized their social policies for ideological ends, the international community engagement has remained limited, often influenced by geopolitical interests and at times by geopolitical expediencies. Consequently, the Afghan population, especially women, girls, and children, continues to bear the burden of this dual crisis, suffering in terms of their lives, well-being, and livelihood. To address these deficiencies in international response, it is crucial to broaden the focus of strategic and humanitarian interventions in Afghanistan to include the ecological crisis. International political initiatives should incorporate ecological and climate concentration into their dealings with the regime. A first step in this direction is to expand the UN Special Rapporteur mandate to encompass the political ecological nexus that pervades the country. In this context, political efforts needs to tackle climate and resilience justice by promoting and safeguarding political and civil rights essential for reducing climate vulnerabilities. These include, but not limited to, access to education, information, and participatory processes. With that, I thank you for your attention.
And there we go. Thank you. Thank you so much, Atal, for those insights into that nexus, which I think, again, we know, but we need to be constantly reminded of the impact, this crucial point around the profound injustice of those who are being most negatively impacted by this deteriorating climate situation are the ones who have no voice in determining the policies that are exacerbating it and hopefully also working to remedy it. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to turn now to Joyce, who is going to speak to one of the issues that has been raised consistently here with us today, efforts regarding accountability, and I believe particularly the mechanism that is being discussed, and give us her insights on that. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you. First, I'd like to say that Amnesty is really delighted to be co-sponsoring this event today. And in particular, I feel quite honored to have been invited to share this space with Afghan human rights defenders, experts, Afghan women activists, the Special Rapporteur, and this group of co-sponsoring states who have very clearly shown their commitment to the human rights of all Afghans, of course, including Afghan women and girls. Excellencies, colleagues, I've been asked to speak about the proposal for an independent international accountability mechanism for Afghanistan, a topic that I'm really happy to see almost every speaker raise today. If established, this mechanism would be a vital tool to advance accountability, collecting and preserving evidence, identifying alleged perpetrators, and preparing case files for use in international and national courts. I'm especially glad to be raising this topic today because finally, this is not just a theoretical idea. As the Special Rapporteur said and others have said, it is a live issue before the Human Rights Council right now, and it is the product of sustained advocacy. But let me start by stressing one thing very clearly. The demand for an international accountability mechanism is not external. It is Afghan-led, it is Afghan-driven, and if I can say, Afghan-insisted since 2021. Their advocacy is what brought my organization, Amnesty International, and dozens of other international groups to stand alongside them. Just last month, on the eve of the current session of the Human Rights Council, more than 80 Afghan civil society organizations, supported by 22 international partners, wrote once again to the members of the Human Rights Council, urging for the creation of this mechanism. This is the voice of Afghans themselves, inside and outside the country, demanding justice, demanding truth, and an end to impunity. So how did we get here? What is happening in Afghanistan today is unacceptable, and we've heard extremely powerful testimony today from my fellow dear panelists, really telling us what the very real impact of the Taliban's institutionalized system of oppression against women and girls looks like. Every day at Amnesty, we are documenting brutal reprisals against dissent, arbitrary arrest, forcible disappearances, torture, ill treatment, and we know these violations are systematic and widespread. What is urgent now is that we use all the tools we have at our disposal to end what is a full-scale assault on human rights. So why does an accountability mechanism matter? I really want to echo what Fatima told us. Afghanistan's crisis is not only a humanitarian or political crisis, it is fundamentally a crisis of impunity. For decades, Afghans have been trapped in cycles of conflict and violence because crimes were never investigated. Perpetrators were never punished, and survivors never received justice. One edict after another, the Taliban are the embodiment of this cycle of impunity. So an independent accountability mechanism could break that cycle. As I've said, it would investigate and document serious human rights abuses and crimes under international law, collect, preserve, and analyze evidence in a way that can be used directly by a court, prepare case files for future prosecutions, and importantly, it would do all these things while centering the rights and needs of victims and survivors to ensure their voices shape the justice process. This is what we mean when we talk about a survivor-centered process. It's important to understand why this proposal is not duplicative, but it's complementary, and the Special Rapporteur spoke to that already. So right now, we're at an important crossroads. The building blocks for an accountability mechanism have been laid, and we can't delay its creation any further. What we need now is political will. We call on states to drive this proposal tabled at the Human Rights Council to the finish line. We'll also need political will from states to ensure it has the funding to do its work. At a time of financial crisis, the elephant in the room, this is really key. This investment in Afghanistan is critical. It would also send a powerful message. Crimes will be investigated, perpetrators will be identified, and justice won't be delayed any longer. And it tells Afghans, and I think this is the most important part, especially women, girls, minorities, that the world has not abandoned them. And if I can just conclude, this accountability mechanism is essential, but it's not a panacea, of course. We need every tool. And I think the Special Rapporteur's advocacy for an all-tools approach is exactly right. That means continuing to support the critical mandate of the Special Rapporteur. It means advancing the codification of gender apartheid under international law so that it's recognized as a crime against humanity. It means backing the ICC, the CEDAW initiative at the ICJ. It also means continuing to support and fund Afghan civil society so they can continue their crucial work exposing Taliban abuses. All of these avenues need to be pursued alongside sustained political pressure and real resources to make sure accountability isn't just promised, but it's actually and finally delivered. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joyce. And amongst all of the excellent points that you've made, I think we really, really need to highlight this point that this is not an external initiative, that this is being driven by Afghans for the future of their country, because that is an important point to make. I am going to hand over to Nagina for her comments concluding this particular round. Nagina, the floor is yours.
Yes, it works now. Thank you, everyone. It's my honor to be here. A special thanks from organizer, state members who co-sponsored today's event, international organization, Amnesty International, WILF International, OMCT, and ISHR. Distinguished panelists, I would like to start with a historic background that Afghanistan is not only affected by humanitarian crisis. I would like to highlight that Afghanistan has suffered 47 years of conflict with atrocity and impunity. Joyce has highlighted very well that too many past crimes remain undocumented and unpunished. And the cycle of violence is repeating itself with those who are blamed for gross human rights violation occupied by higher position with impunity. What's happening right now? Just today, we're just informed that according to the report, as of this evening in Afghanistan, Afghanistan has been particularly Kabul disconnected from global internet. And citizens have lost access to online services and telecommunication connection, which further worsens the situation in the country. There is no functioning legal system in Afghanistan based on finding of UN reports. Justice does not exist in my homeland. Activists, journalists, women rights defenders, civil society leaders, and former officials who have been forced to return from Pakistan and Iran, they are facing detention, torture, execution, and enforced disappearance. There's an urgent call for action. Afghanistan needs for an independent international accountability mechanism, a call which is supported by national and international organizations, but led by Afghan civil society organizations from inside the country and from outside the country. The purpose of accountability mechanism is very clear, and the accountability mechanism letter is inside the file in front of you in the desk. You can look at it and you can read it in details. It covers investigate, collect, preserve, and analyze evidence of crimes, including gender-based violence and persecution. Support victims and survivor-centered justice, access to truth, repression, and the end of impunity. Complement existing effort by UN Special Rapporteur, International Criminal Court, and International Court of Justice. The evidence will also be used for universal jurisdiction and other justice avenues that will be created. There would be a very specific recommendation. I would like to use my final part as well. Establish a mechanism with demand to investigate and document past and ongoing violations. Recommend measures to ensure accountability, justice, and repression. Ensure the mechanism include a gender and children rights perspective as a victim center and engage closely with Afghan civil society, especially women-led organizations. Renew and resource the mandate of UN Special Rapporteur and maintain a dedicated dialogue space on women and girls' rights. Expedite the evacuation of women human rights defenders from Iran and Pakistan and stop forced deportation of activist defenders from these countries. We have discussed today about the humanitarian funding which is targeted for Afghanistan, and there is a commitment. I thank you for your commitment, but what I would like to highlight that make sure the women and girls' access and engagement are meaningfully in all humanitarian funding for the country. And make sure that the funds are designed women-centered. And to support the women-led organizations who are putting their life at risk without any protection of INGOs and UN agencies on the ground, and they remain exist. Highlighted the political process as well, and highlighted the ongoing Doha process, maybe in the future and in the past. But what I would like to highlight here is, in any political processes, not only woman-centered would be the content or the discussion. I would like to mention that make sure that women are on the table. And women of Afghanistan are changing and shaping the future of our country, not only in the content, but in physical presence from the beginning till end of any political process
that international community is talking about us, but they should not take decision about us. The decision and the future should be shaped together. There are many promises, laws, and commitments in the world to protect human rights, especially for women in the country like Afghanistan. But if these promises stay only on paper and are not turned into action, then we must ask ourselves, have we failed to make them into action? Or these promises are no longer enough for the current crisis in the world? So I ask you, those who have believed in human rights and equality, will you stand with us? Will you make these promises real and turn words in action for the people of Afghanistan and for women and girls of Afghanistan? And I would like to highlight last point, that it is not ended in this event. We have a plan of, which is going to be implemented, HRD Plus, along with other 3 civil society Afghan-led organizations. We are organizing People Tribunal for Women of Afghanistan in Madrid, Spain, which will be happening from 8 to 10 of October. This will be a historic moment, the first ever People Tribunal on the rights of Afghan women, which is led by Afghan civil society, which serves a vital platform to amplify survivors' testimony and demand justice and accountability, along with the full restoration of Afghan women, dignity, and human rights. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Nagina, for these inspiring words and call to action. As noted at the beginning, we're going to do a real lightning round of just some recommendations and very concrete ways forward from a number of our panelists. So I'm going to come back to Miriam for 1 minute of giving the orders to our attendees here about what they need to do. The floor is yours.
Excellencies, leaders, especially I'm calling on our female women leaders. 3 urgent needs must guide us: justice and recognition for victims of gender persecution, repression, and humanitarian neglect. Second, comprehensive documentation of crime, including education bans and restriction on female aid workers. Third, protection and meaningful inclusion of defenders of Afghan civil society and women's human rights. And 3, immediate action must follow. Establish an accountability mechanism with a strong gender and child right lens, integrating survivor participating at every stage. Renew and adequately resource the mandate of the UN Special Rapporteur on Afghanistan. Third, ensure humanitarian responses address women's urgent need by deploying female health workers, supporting women-led organizations, and guaranteeing access to education and livelihood, even in time of crisis. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Fatima.
It's interesting, it should be read, then you can speak. So I somehow echoing also what already mentioned by my colleagues, no recognition and no normalization of the Taliban until every decrease violating of women's rights and children's rights in Afghanistan is revoked. Support and for accountability mechanism, starting from Mr. Bennett, Special Rapporteur mandates that has been very supportive of Afghanistan civil society work with very concrete reports and recommendations that has been providing through reporting to UN and to states member also, providing solutions. Potential ICJ case under the CEDA, Afghan civil society actually conducted 2 consultations and other informal consultations to talk about our concerns, our questions about this process, and demanding more transparency and inclusion of Afghan voices and expertise actually throughout this process. This initiative or potential case, when it was announced, gave a lot of hope to Afghan women's rights activists, women in Afghanistan, that it will be bringing the Taliban to the International Court of Justice for their violation of women's rights. ICC investigation is really important because of the two leader of the Taliban they're managing and leading all of these systematic gender persecution in Afghanistan. And other Afghan-led affairs, as Nagina Jan mentioned, People's Tribunal is going on, and it's really important to support those kind of initiatives. And the creation of independent investigation mechanisms. Also, investing in Afghan and youth-led networks and organizations which are the last line of the democracy and human rights in Afghanistan and for our people. True and meaningful inclusion of Afghan women, minorities, children, and civil society in shaping the country's future. And exclusion is not legitimate. We should consider Afghan as partners, and we should include them throughout the processes about Afghanistan. Finally, the world must actually find both capacity and the courage to confront horrific brutalities, whether in Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, and ongoing human rights crisis in Afghanistan. We should not think about one country and think we don't have the capacity. We should have the capacity and bravery to talk about all of the atrocities around the world and condemn them and also take actions against them. Thank you.
I'm now going to come back to Joyce for some final recommendations.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I know we've been talking about Geneva processes. I have, at least. And I think if you'll just allow me to mention New York as well. Discussions on accountability, on justice, on human rights, they matter here, too, in New York at the UN. And these are not just relevant across the ocean in Geneva. New York bodies, the Security Council, the General Assembly, they must work in support of accountability in Afghanistan and not undermine justice. So many consequential political and diplomatic decisions are taken here in this building, and those decisions must be principled. They must include meaningfully and fully Afghan women. If we truly wish to not normalize what's happening, the political bodies have to engage in a matter that does not undercut current efforts. Richard, you talked about how this moment is a test, and as we approach 25 years of the Women, Peace and Security agenda, I would argue that Afghanistan is also a test of our resolve and our commitment to this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joyce. And of course, I could not agree with you more. And we have the room for a little bit longer. I know that people have busy schedules, but if there are 2 or 3 questions or interventions, very, very quick, that people would, oh, I see 2. So I'll take the 3. Okay, I'm going to take those 3, and then we'll have to wrap it up with some concluding remarks. So, yes.
Thank you. My name is Inès Davot. I'm a French lawyer based in Paris. And in Paris, I represent Afghan NGOs and also Afghan women. I think we are all agree, like the real challenge today is to make justice happen. And some national courts, like France, already have the power of universal jurisdiction. As this is also a recommendation in the note you give to us. But the reality is, without political will, without coordination, this power stays only on papers. At the same time, in France, and also in European countries like Germany, a lot of Afghan defenders, Afghan women, in exile, face transnational repression. This is a reality, this is a fact. Harassment, intimidation, surveillance by supporters of Taliban. So my question is, We know that some support for universal jurisdiction exists, and some programs protect defenders in exile, but maybe they are too separate, not coordinated. So, do you think the international community should also create more stronger common system to connect these efforts and to give a real support to national courts in Europe, in France, and to give real safety for Afghan women, even in exile?
Thank you so much. Please, very great.
Thank you so much to the moderator and the panelists for this powerful and deeply necessary conversation. My name is Ellen Creda-Dale, and I serve as a focal point lead of the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth, which is the General Assembly mandated mechanism to bring youth inputs into intergovernmental policymaking spaces within the UN and member states since 1992. I also serve on the organizing program committee of the United Nations World Data Forum, where I work closely with UN entities, member states, and civil society to advance data-driven solutions that center human rights, dignity, and inclusion. And across all of these spaces, from policy rooms to grassroots coalitions, one truth is painfully clear. Young people don't just witness injustice, we live it, we carry it, and too often we are left to survive it alone. And yet we are also the builders of new futures. And in the context of Afghanistan, this work feels especially urgent. Many in my generation have grown up seeing their peers, particularly young women and girls, have their future stolen twice over, first by systemic human rights violations and then by the erasure of their stories from the global narrative. If justice is to be truly survivor-centered, then young people, including survivors themselves, must be at the table shaping what that justice looks like. So my question to the panel is this: how can the United Nations system and its partners ensure that Afghan youth, especially young women, activists, and those in the diaspora, are not just consulted after decisions are made, but are directly involved in co-designing accountability mechanisms, truth-telling processes, accurate data collection processes, and pathways for justice and reparations? And lastly, as we look ahead, what concrete steps can be taken to ensure that their lived experiences, their testimonies, their data, their vision shape not only the world and how it responds to violations, but how can we prevent them from happening again? Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Elisa Yamamoto. I'm a legal advisor with the End Gender Apartheid campaign. I just want to note how multiple speakers today have referred to the Taliban's institutionalized regime of systematic gender-based oppression as gender apartheid. And Ambassador Ray, I think, very eloquently spoke to the utility of the term apartheid as a tool for mobilization and resistance. I'd just like to ask a follow-up question about the impetus and utility of codification. As I see it, legal recognition of gender apartheid is really about recalibrating international law to reflect the totality of harms being perpetrated and really walk the walk when it comes to victim and survivor-centered approach to justice and accountability. So to the esteemed panelists, I'd ask, how might gender apartheid recognition fill an existing impunity gap, and what can states concretely do to recognize this crime in international law, including at the Sixth Committee, as Richard Bennett noted? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Fantastic questions regarding national courts and universal jurisdiction, inclusion and how we talk about meaningful inclusion for youth, for children, and the issues around gender apartheid. I'm going to pass to Fatima for a couple of reflections, and then I think we're going to have to, and then, yeah, yes, and we're going to close soon, yes. Fatima.
Thank you very much. I just replied to very great questions that were already asked here. I think just going to you, universal jurisdiction is one of the mechanisms for accountability that we also pushing, and it's really important we also utilize this possible accountability mechanism in different countries, and with the support actually of lawyers and groups in the countries that can use the mechanisms. And for the how actually to prevent the experience of youth and children's violations in Afghanistan, first, it's really important to bring the, you hear from Afghan groups and individuals who are working and researching and doing, bringing all of those voices from Afghanistan to the bodies like you, so you connect with them and talk to them and hear from them. And how to prevent, actually, is the main perpetrator is the Taliban. How we prevent a disease is just cutting the main and source of the disease, right? I know it's a very idealistic thing to say right now, but just connect with people, individuals, groups that can provide all of this information to you. More, inclusion of voices from youth in dialogues and conversations. And the codification of gender apartheid, I think that's, as all of us mentioned here, no country in the world is experiencing what women and girls in Afghanistan experience. So it's really important. It's really important to have possible tools and possible international laws to confront the Taliban, more powerful, and codification of the gender apartheid, giving us more tools to go against the Taliban and advocate for women's rights. Sorry, I tried to be short. Thank you very much.
Wonderfully. Thank you. Joyce, did you want to weigh in on anything, or no? No? Did you want to weigh in on that?
Quickly on gender apartheid, the question Alyssa just asked. I mean, we at Amnesty support fully the codification of gender apartheid, and it's very convenient that there's an opportunity right now for states to fully engage on that process and then submit in their comments when they're engaging in the Sixth Committee a demand for gender apartheid and for a definition to be included in those discussions. I would strongly encourage you, if you haven't already, to look at all the activism and all of the documents and letters that have been sent by the End Gender Apartheid campaign and other campaigns that are working on this issue. But there's really an opportunity coming up now, and I think that it would be great for more states cross-regionally to engage on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Miriam, 30 seconds. I'm very strict now.
Talk from the reality ground of Afghanistan. I didn't wrote anything. I'm talking from my heart. A girl after 10th grade, a girl who was supposed to start her university, a girl who was in the last year of her university, a girl who was in the last year of her medical school, a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, a professor, a woman working in any form of society that was, they were doing their best, but Taliban stopped them. They are not allowed. They have to just stay at home. Even the elder women who needed to walk for their health go to parks. Taliban don't allow them to go. A young girl who are making the vlogs, is this, at that time, every country, every girls are allowed to do. But the Taliban are beating her and not allowing her. Why? I don't know. Do you guys call this gender apartheid? It is, to me, a gender apartheid, because women are not allowed to do anything in that country. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam, and my apologies for rushing you on an incredibly important point. Richard.
Miriam, I find it hard to follow you because that's so important, but I just wanted to acknowledge with my thanks the support that I've heard in the room from civil society and from member states for my mandate. I really appreciate it. I'd also like to mention, and I hesitate to do this, that the UN Finance Committee has approved 10 staff to support me. At the moment, I have 2, plus 1 thanks to UN Women, so 3. And I will be going back to Geneva next week to knock on the door to try and get some improvement in that. This is the way the financial crisis is hitting the work that we can do. One thing that wasn't mentioned, which I think is important, is that the Taliban have banned women staff from entering their places of employment, UN compounds. And the reports I've received from Afghanistan are that they have placed not just soldiers, not just police, but military outside the gates of UN compounds to prevent UN women staff from entering those compounds. That, to me, is shocking, and as it wasn't mentioned, I thought I'd raise it now. And finally, on youth. I think this is so important, and I've actually got a project proposal ready to go with, I've just got a message, a little bit of funding, but not enough. So I'm so keen to partner and to give you the lead, but we've got something starting, and if we can get some more help for that, it would be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. Incredibly important final points to ground us in our work moving forward. I believe that, Nasir, are you going to close our meeting here today? I want to thank all of our panelists for an amazing session. Please.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Taylor, and for a very wonderfully moderating the panel, and also for our panelists, distinguished panelists. Just to, I know that time is running out and we are already behind, but I have to just summarize that we heard from all participants that the current situation in Afghanistan, socially, politically, economically, and security-wise, is of course dire, and particularly the current situation on the human rights, the violation of human rights there are acknowledgements that this is a gender apartheid. And we also heard that the implications of the Taliban's policies, and we also heard about the not only the forced returnees, the situation of forced returnees, that Afghanistan is not safe, and particularly the call for the principles of non-refoulement, and that's very important. And at the same time, we heard that there was a consensus from all speakers that there must be an international universal accountability mechanism should be strengthened, and all tools should be used to hold those perpetrators accountable. And particularly, impunity is not acceptable. And the role of survivors and victims to provide them justice was highlighted. And at the same time, strong testimonies from our member states that Taliban's policies are violations of crimes, violations of human rights, and they are counted or deemed as crimes against humanity. And all countries, of course, we heard condemnations about the Taliban's policies. That was very strong. And at the same time, the initiatives that hold the Taliban accountable under the CEDAW, ICJ, and ICC, they were highlighted. But at the same time, we heard strong recommendations, support for a robust monitoring independent mechanism, support for the Special Rapporteur's mandate, particularly providing funding, and also it was highlighted. And also there was a call for actions beyond words. We need, there was a stress, this was a stress that now is the time that we have to take actions. And Afghan voices, and particularly the voice of women and girls and human rights defenders, should be at the center. And if there are any engagement with the Taliban, always there should be meaningful and participation of women, and it should be principled, and no normalization without any improvements on the situation in Afghanistan on the ground. And at the same time, we also heard some of the very clear messages from our distinguished panelists. I don't want to repeat it, but overall, our meeting was, I think it was very important for at this time that particularly Afghan people and women and girls are going through a very different situation, and they are being erased from the society. And I would like to highlight that the support of international partners and the presence of those countries who are here are a testimony that Afghanistan is not forgotten, and Afghan people, particularly Afghan women and girls, they are not being forgotten, and international community is looking for how to strengthen the universal justice mechanism system and how to hold the perpetrators accountable. And at this, so I would like to take this opportunity to thank our co-organizer, HRD Plus, our co-chair, HRD Plus, and all co-sponsors for their presence, for their support, for being here, for taking time to support the Afghan women and girls, and emphasizing the importance of accountability in Afghanistan, and also their commitments for the people of Afghanistan and justice and fighting against impunity. So I also want to thank those panelists and who joined us virtually, and other participants who are staying and who are watching this event. I want to thank each one of you, all of you, for your time, for your patience. And last but not least, I want to thank, of course, Ambassador Ray left, and he was so kind. He highlighted that as chair of the Group of Friends of Afghanistan in the past 5 years, Ambassador Ray and his team in Canada has been so supportive and very principled about the human rights situation in Afghanistan, and always highlighting the dire humanitarian and security, human rights situation. But at the same time, I would like to take this opportunity to thank, of course, he left. He was always a staunch supporter of our mission and our human rights defenders and Afghan civil society. And on behalf of my colleagues, I also would like to highlight that our mission is committed to providing the platform to all those credible voices, particularly Afghan women, civil society, human rights defenders, who are trying to fight against this current regime in Afghanistan with their policies. We have to continue, and we are committed. Always, please count on our mission. And thank you for your time. And we just want to give a round of applause to our moderator and panelists and our distinguished keynote speaker, to all of them. Thank you so much, and let's So our meeting is concluded. Thank you.